Captain Jake Morrison stood at the docking bay of Station Omega-7, checking his datapad for what felt like the 100th time. The cargo manifest showed one item, a passenger transport to the Zalathi homeworld. Simple enough, except the passenger was Princess Kiranel of the Zalathi Empire, and according to every briefing he'd received, she despised humans with every fiber of her being. The airlock hissed open, and Jake straightened his worn leather jacket. He'd been doing transport runs for 15 years, carrying everything from rare minerals to diplomatic packages across the galaxy. But this was his first time transporting royalty, especially royalty that apparently wanted nothing more than to see his entire species wiped from existence. She entered the docking bay surrounded by 4 Zalathi guards, their crystalline armor catching the harsh station lights. The Zalathi were humanoid in shape but taller, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer like water. Their eyes were larger than humans, completely black except for rings of silver around the edges. Princess Kiranel stood at nearly 7 feet tall, her long white hair flowing behind her like liquid starlight. "Princess," Jake said, offering a respectful nod. "I'm Captain Morrison. I'll be taking you to—" "I know who you are," she interrupted, her voice like ice cracking on a frozen lake. "Let us be clear about something, human. I am only on your pathetic vessel because my father insists on this ridiculous diplomatic gesture. I would rather swim through the void of space than spend 3 days trapped with one of your kind." Jake kept his face neutral. He'd dealt with difficult passengers before. "Understood, Your Highness. Your quarters are prepared. You'll have complete privacy for the duration of the journey." One of her guards stepped forward. "The princess requires—" "The princess can speak for herself, Varric," Kiranel snapped. She turned those unsettling silver-ringed eyes on Jake. "I require nothing from you except silence and distance. Your species disgusts me. You spread across the galaxy like a disease, claiming friendship while you pollute every world you touch." "Right," Jake said slowly. "Well, the good news is my ship's pretty small. Easy to avoid each other. Shall we?" He turned and headed toward his ship without waiting for a response. Behind him, he heard the princess making angry sounds in her native language. The Blue Wanderer wasn't much to look at, a converted cargo hauler with a few passenger cabins retrofitted into the hold. But she was fast, reliable, and most importantly, she was his. The princess swept past him as they reached the boarding ramp, her robes rustling like wind through trees. "This thing is supposed to carry me across 3 star systems?" "She's gotten me through worse," Jake replied, patting the hull affectionately. "Don't let her looks fool you. The Blue Wanderer has outrun Imperial cruisers and survived more asteroid fields than I can count." "How reassuring," Kiranel said dryly. "A ship held together by human stubbornness and probably adhesive tape." Jake bit back his first 3 responses and settled for, "Your cabin is down the corridor, 2nd door on the right. The lock is biometric, it's already programmed for you. Galley is opposite if you need food. We launch in 20 minutes. She disappeared into the ship without another word, her guards following. Only one remained, Varric, apparently her head of security. The big Zalathi warrior looked Jake up and down with obvious disdain. "If any harm comes to the princess," Varric said quietly, "I will personally ensure you experience pain beyond your limited human imagination." "Noted," Jake replied, "though you might want to save the death threats for someone who's actually a threat. I'm just the taxi driver." Varric's expression suggested he didn't find that amusing. He followed his charge into the ship, leaving Jake alone on the ramp. The captain sighed and rubbed his temples. 3 days. He just had to survive 3 days with an alien princess who hated his guts. How hard could it be? The launch went smoothly, Station Omega-7 shrinking behind them as Jake engaged the hyperdrive. The familiar hum of the engines settled his nerves. Whatever else happened, he was in his element now. The Blue Wanderer responded to his touch like an old friend, sliding through the void with practiced ease. He'd plotted a course through relatively safe space. No point in taking risks with royalty aboard. The journey would take them through the Helix Nebula, past the mining colonies of Sigma Prime, and finally to the Zalathi homeworld of Luminara. 3 days of avoiding his passenger and collecting a paycheck that would keep him flying for another year. Jake settled into his pilot's chair and pulled up a book on his datapad. He'd gotten through about 3 chapters when an alarm started blinking on his console. Nothing critical, just a minor fluctuation in the port stabilizer. He made a note to check it at the next stop and went back to reading. 2 hours into the flight, his comm system crackled. "Human." Jake toggled the response. "Yes, Princess? Your ship is making an irritating humming noise. That's the hyperdrive. It's supposed to do that. Make it stop." Jake counted to 5 before responding. "I'm afraid that's not possible, unless you'd prefer to spend 3 months traveling at sublight speed?" The comm clicked off without a response. Jake smiled despite himself. At least she was easy to handle. She wanted nothing to do with him, which suited him fine. He'd had passengers who wanted to chat the entire journey, asking about every button and display on the bridge. Silence was golden. The first day passed without incident. Jake saw neither the princess nor her guards, though he occasionally heard movement in the passenger section. He ate his meals on the bridge, ran diagnostics on the ship's systems, and caught up on his reading. It was almost peaceful. On the morning of the second day, Jake was awakened by proximity alarms screaming. He rolled out of his bunk and stumbled to the bridge, still pulling on his shirt. The display showed multiple contacts approaching fast, too fast to be merchant vessels. "Pirates," he muttered, dropping into the pilot's chair and bringing weapons online. The Blue Wanderer had teeth, but not many. A few laser cannons and a single torpedo tube wouldn't do much against a determined pirate crew. The comm system crackled. "Unidentified freighter, this is Captain Torx of the Crimson Fang. Cut your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resist and we'll cut you apart." Jake's fingers flew over the controls, calculating jump vectors. They were too close. Any attempt to enter hyperspace would give the pirates time to fire. He needed another option. "What is happening?" The princess stood in the bridge doorway, somehow managing to look regal even in sleeping robes. "Pirates," Jake said shortly. "Strap in. This is about to get bumpy." "You're going to fight them? In this cargo hauler?" "Not fight," Jake said, engaging the sublight engines. "Run, and probably hide. Maybe some creative flying, definitely some praying." The Blue Wanderer lurched forward, acceleration pressing them back into their seats. Jake had removed most of the safety limiters years ago. When you flew alone on the frontier, speed was life. The pirates hadn't expected a beat-up freighter to have this much thrust. They fell behind, but only temporarily. "Warning shots," Jake said as laser fire splashed against their shields. "They want us intact. That's good. Gives us options." "What options?" Kiranel demanded. "Your shields won't last long against their weapons." "Don't need long," Jake muttered, steering them toward a dense asteroid field. "Just need enough." The princess's eyes widened. "You're not seriously—" "Oh, I'm very serious." Jake killed the running lights and diverted all power to engines and shields. "You might want to hold on to something." The Blue Wanderer dove into the asteroid field like a dolphin into water. Jake had run this route before, knew where the densest clusters were, where the magnetic fields would mask their signature. The pirates followed, but cautiously. Their ships were bigger, less maneuverable. Jake wove between tumbling rocks the size of buildings, using the asteroid's gravity to slingshot around corners. His hands moved on instinct, years of experience guiding him through passages that looked impossible. Behind them, one of the pirate ships clipped an asteroid and spun away, venting atmosphere. "How are you doing this?" Kiranel breathed, her anger forgotten in the face of Jake's flying. Practice, Jake said through gritted teeth. A massive asteroid loomed ahead, riddled with mining tunnels from some long-abandoned operation. And a little bit of crazy. He flew straight at the asteroid, waiting until the last possible second before diving into one of the tunnels. The Blue Wanderer's hull scraped against the walls, sparks flying. Behind them, another pirate ship tried to follow and smashed into the tunnel mouth, too big to fit. They burst out the other side into a pocket of clear space. Jake immediately cut the engines and activated silent running mode. The ship's systems went dark, everything but life support shutting down. They drifted among the asteroids like just another piece of debris. "Don't move," Jake whispered. "Don't even breathe loud." They waited in the darkness, watching the scanner. The remaining pirate ships circled the asteroid field, searching. One passed within 100 meters of their position, close enough that Jake could see the skull painted on its hull through the viewport, but it kept moving. Unable to distinguish the powered-down freighter from the surrounding rocks. Minutes stretched like hours. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the pirates gave up and jumped to hyperspace. Jake waited another 10 minutes before bringing the systems back online. "Clear," he said, slumping back in his chair. "We're safe." Kiranel stared at him with an unreadable expression. "You saved us." "Saved myself," Jake corrected. "You just happened to be aboard." "Those maneuvers. I've seen Zalathi Ace pilots who couldn't have managed that. How did a human—" "Look, Princess," Jake interrupted, suddenly tired. "I get it. You hate humans. We're primitive. We're disgusting. We spread like a disease. I've heard it all before. But right now, this primitive human needs to check for damage and plot a new course, because those pirates will be watching the direct route. So if you'll excuse me—" He turned back to his controls, dismissing her. For a long moment, she stood there silently. Then she spoke, her voice different than before, quieter, less certain. "My sister was killed by human mercenaries during the border conflicts 5 years ago. She was trying to negotiate a ceasefire and they shot her down. Said it was a mistake. Friendly fire." Jake's hands stilled on the controls. He didn't turn around. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. I'm sorry. I've hated your species ever since," she continued. "Blamed all of you for the actions of a few. My father says I'm being irrational, but grief isn't rational," Jake finished. "Yeah, I know." She moved closer and he could see her reflection in the dark viewport. "You know," Jake was quiet for a moment, then, "I had a daughter, Sarah. She was on the colony ship Bright Hope when it was destroyed. Zalathi raiders looking for valuable cargo. 300 families gone in an instant." The bridge fell silent except for the hum of the engines. "But you don't hate us," Kiranel said softly. "I did. For a while." Jake finally turned to face her. "Then I realized something. The galaxy's full of good people and bad people, and they come in all species. Hating an entire race for the actions of a few. That's just another kind of poison. It eats you up inside, and Sarah wouldn't have wanted that for me." The princess seemed to shrink, her regal bearing crumbling. I should return to my quarters." "Princess," Jake called as she reached the door. "We're going to need to take an indirect route now. Adds about a day to our journey. That okay with you?" She paused. "That's acceptable, Captain. And perhaps we could share a meal tomorrow. I find I'm curious about human cuisine." After she left, Jake sat alone on the bridge, staring at the stars. He'd lied about one thing. He had hated the Zalathi, all of them, for a long time after Sarah died. It had taken years to let go of that anger, to realize it was destroying him from the inside. Maybe the princess would figure that out too. Maybe not. Either way, they still had 2 days of travel ahead, and something had shifted between them. The wall of hatred had cracked, just a little. Jake plotted their new course and engaged the hyperdrive. The stars stretched into lines around them as they jumped back into hyperspace, leaving the asteroid field and its dangers behind. But ahead lay different challenges, the kind that couldn't be outrun or hidden from, the kind that required facing hard truths and maybe, just maybe, finding understanding in the most unexpected places. Jake woke to the smell of something burning. He bolted upright, nearly falling out of his bunk in his haste to reach the bridge. The acrid smoke was coming from the galley where Princess Kiranel stood holding a fire suppressor, staring at what had once been a cooking unit. "I was attempting to prepare morning tea," she said with as much dignity as someone covered in fire-suppressant foam could manage. "Your equipment malfunctioned." Jake surveyed the damage. The cooking unit was thoroughly dead, carbon scoring covering most of the galley wall. "Did you maybe try to use the Zalathi power adapter with the human voltage settings?" "Perhaps," she admitted grudgingly. Despite everything, Jake found himself fighting back a smile. "Well, good news is we have backup units. Bad news is now the whole ship's going to smell like burnt electronics for days." "I apologize," Kiranel said stiffly. "I'm not accustomed to doing things for myself." "Princess life, huh?" Jake opened a storage panel and pulled out a portable cooking unit. "Here, let me show you how this one works. The trick is understanding that human tech runs on different frequencies than Zalathi equipment." She watched intently as he demonstrated the controls. "Why do your species insist on making everything so complicated?" "Says the species that requires 17 different utensils for a formal dinner," Jake countered. "I've been to a Zalathi state dinner. Nearly started a war using the wrong spoon for my soup." To his surprise, she actually smiled. It was small, barely a quirk of her lips, but it transformed her face. "You attended a state dinner? When?" "About 10 years ago. I was transporting an Earth ambassador to the peace talks on Century Station. Got invited as the +1 when his aide got food poisoning." Jake started preparing coffee with practiced ease. "Spent the whole night terrified I'd accidentally insult someone. Your people have a lot of rules." "Structure brings order," Kiranel said automatically, then paused. "Though I suppose some of our traditions are rather elaborate." Jake handed her a cup of coffee. "Try this. Human morning ritual. Fair warning, it's an acquired taste." She took a cautious sip and immediately made a face. "This is terrible." "Yeah, but it's terrible with caffeine," Jake said, taking a long drink of his own cup. "Give it time. It grows on you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both nursing their drinks. The princess had changed out of her formal robes into simpler travel clothes, and without all the royal trappings, she looked younger, less imposing. "About that meal," she said suddenly. "Would this evening be acceptable? I find I'm curious about human culture beyond your strange beverage choices." "Sure," Jake agreed. "I'll even use the right spoons." A ghost of that smile returned. "See that you do, Captain." The day passed peacefully. Jake ran maintenance checks on the ship, while Kiranel retreated to her quarters. He found himself humming as he worked, realizing it had been a long time since he'd had anyone to share a meal with. Space was lonely, and he'd gotten used to the solitude. Maybe too used to it. As evening approached, he set up the small dining area off the galley. Nothing fancy. The Blue Wanderer wasn't built for entertainment, but he had a decent bottle of wine he'd been saving, and he knew his way around the kitchen well enough to prepare something edible. Kiranel arrived precisely on time, because of course she did. Punctuality was probably bred into Zalathi royalty. She'd done something different with her hair, braiding it in a style that looked almost human. "Smells interesting," she said, settling gracefully into a chair. "Spaghetti carbonara," Jake announced, setting plates down. "Traditional Earth food. Nothing too exotic. Figured we should start simple." She examined the pasta with scientific interest. "Your people eat a lot of processed grains." "Says the species that ferments tree bark for 6 months and calls it a delicacy," Jake shot back. Aged thornwood is a sophisticated flavor, she protested, but she was smiling again. Very well. Show me how to eat this properly. Jake demonstrated the fork-twirling technique, trying not to laugh as she attempted to copy him. For someone so graceful in every other way, she was surprisingly clumsy with the unfamiliar utensil. After her third failed attempt, she gave him a look that could have frozen suns. Not one word. Wouldn't dream of it, Your Highness, Jake said solemnly, then promptly ruined it by snorting when she flung pasta sauce across the table. This is impossible, she declared. How do human children manage it? Years of practice and lots of laundry, Jake admitted. Here, try it like this. He reached over to adjust her grip, and she didn't pull away. Progress, he thought. They ate in companionable silence for a while. The wine helped, a decent vintage from the Martian colonies that paired well with the rich sauce. Kiranel seemed to relax by degrees, the rigid posture she usually maintained softening. Can I ask you something? Jake said eventually. Why were you really traveling alone? I mean, besides your guards. Seems like a princess would have a whole entourage. She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, my father is dying. The illness that took my mother has returned, and the healers say he has perhaps a year, less if he continues to refuse treatment. I'm sorry. He wants me to take the throne. She set down her fork, staring at the table. But I'm not ready. I'm too angry, too broken. A queen can't rule with hatred in her heart. He knows this, so he sends me on these diplomatic missions, hoping I'll find perspective. And have you? She looked up at him, those silver-ringed eyes unreadable. I'm beginning to. Meeting you has been educational. Before Jake could respond, every alarm on the ship started screaming. He was out of his chair and running for the bridge before the first whale finished, Kiranel close behind. What is it now? She demanded. Jake's blood ran cold as he read the displays. Gravity well. We're being pulled out of hyperspace. The Blue Wanderer shuddered and bucked as she was forcibly dropped back to normal space. Jake fought the controls, trying to minimize the damage from the unscheduled transition. Around them, stars snapped back into focus, and there, directly ahead, was a ship Jake had hoped never to see. The Crimson Fang, he breathed. Those bastards were waiting for us. How? Kiranel gripped the back of his chair as the ship rocked from weapon impacts. The route you chose was random. Tracker, Jake realized with a sick feeling. They must have tagged us in the asteroid field, probably when that ship got close. I should have done a full sweep. More impacts. The shields were holding, but not for long. Jake threw the Wanderer into evasive maneuvers, but they were still recovering from the gravity well. The engines responded sluggishly. Attention, freighter. Captain Torx's voice crackled over the comm. You led us on quite the chase, but playtime's over. You're carrying something valuable, aren't you? Someone important enough to risk the asteroid field to protect. Jake and Kiranel exchanged looks. If the pirates realized they had Zalathi royalty aboard, just cargo, Jake transmitted back, trying to buy time. Nothing worth dying over. Nice try. But we've been monitoring your communications, encrypted channels to the Zalathi homeworld, royal encryption no less. Torx laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Surrender now and we'll be civilized about the ransom. Make us work for it and things get messy. Can we run? Kiranel asked quietly. Jake checked the readings. Not this time. They've got us boxed in. 3 ships, plus the gravity generator. We'd never make it to jump distance. Then we fight? In this bucket? Jake laughed bitterly. We've got 2 torpedoes and some laser cannons that couldn't punch through their shields on a good day. So we surrender? Let them take me? The resignation in her voice made something twist in Jake's chest. Not a chance. I said I'd get you home, and I meant it. Against 3 pirate vessels? Captain, even I know those odds are impossible. Jake was quiet for a moment, thinking furiously. Then a slow smile spread across his face. Maybe not. Tell me, Princess, how much do you know about human engineering? Very little. Why? Because humans have a gift for making things work in ways they were never intended to. He started pulling up system diagrams. For instance, did you know that a standard hyperdrive, if you reverse the polarity and dump all your reactor power into it at once, makes one hell of an explosion? Her eyes widened. You're talking about turning your ship into a bomb? Not the whole ship, just the backup hyperdrive unit in Cargo Bay 2. His fingers flew over the controls. If I can eject it at just the right moment, that's insane. That's human, Jake corrected. We're really good at insane. The Crimson Fang was closing in, confident in their victory. Jake let them come, all while rerouting power and reprogramming the backup drive. It wasn't meant to work this way. The safety protocols screamed warnings at him, but he overrode them all. Freighter, you have 30 seconds to surrender, Torx announced. After that, we start shooting pieces off your ship until you comply. Kira Nell, Jake said quietly, not looking away from his work. There's an escape pod in the maintenance corridor. If this goes wrong, I'm not leaving, she said firmly. Whatever happens, we face it together. Jake glanced at her, surprised. Thought you hated humans? I'm revising my opinion. She moved to the co-pilot station. Tell me how to help. When I say now, dump everything we've got into the forward shields. Every last amp, we're going to need them. The pirates were almost in optimal firing range. Jake finished his modifications and gripped the manual release for the cargo bay. Old-fashioned but reliable. Sometimes the analog ways were best. 20 seconds, Torx warned. Hey, Torx, Jake called out cheerfully. You ever hear the humans saying about gift horses? What? Never look one in the mouth. Jake yanked the release. Now! The cargo bay doors blew open and the modified hyperdrive unit tumbled out, spinning end over end toward the Crimson Fang. Kira Nell slammed all power to forward shields, just as Jake had asked. The pirate ship, seeing the ejected cargo, assumed they were surrendering and moved to collect it. They realized their mistake too late. The explosion when the hyperdrive detonated was visible from 3 systems away. The Crimson Fang vanished in a ball of superheated plasma, taking one of the escort ships with it. The shockwave slammed into the Blue Wanderer, but their reinforced shields held barely. Jake didn't waste time celebrating. He threw full power to the engines, aiming for the gap in their formation. The surviving pirate ships were reeling, confused by the loss of their flagship. By the time they recovered enough to pursue, the Blue Wanderer was already approaching jump distance. Gravity well is fluctuating, Kira Nell reported, reading the instruments like she'd been doing it for years. Whatever powered it must have been on the Crimson Fang. Good. Hold on. This is going to be rough. They made the jump to hyperspace, just as laser fire filled the space where they'd been. The Blue Wanderer protested. Jumping so soon after being yanked out of hyperspace wasn't good for the engines, but she held together. Jake kept them in hyperspace for just a few minutes, then dropped back to normal space to check for pursuit. Nothing. They'd done it. They'd actually done it. He slumped back in his chair, adrenaline crash hitting hard. We're clear. Kira Nell was staring at him. You destroyed a pirate flagship with a cargo hauler and a spare part. Don't forget the terrible odds and a complete disregard for safety regulations, Jake added weakly. That was the most insanely brave thing I've ever witnessed. She shook her head in amazement. My people tell stories of honor and courage in battle, but this? You had no weapons, no advantages, and you still won. That's kind of our thing, Jake admitted. Humans, I mean. We're not the strongest or the fastest or the smartest species out there, but we're really, really good at looking at impossible situations and saying, yeah, but what if we try this crazy thing? And it works? More often than it should. He checked their position and plotted a new course. We're about a day out from your homeworld now. Should be smooth sailing from here. Kiranel was quiet for a moment. Jake, Captain Morrison, I owe you an apology. I've spent so long hating your species that I never stopped to truly see you. My anger blinded me to the fact that humans, like all species, contain multitudes, good and bad, brave and cowardly, kind and cruel. We're all just people trying to make our way in the galaxy, Jake said simply. Some of us are better at it than others. My sister would have liked you, she said softly. She always said I was too quick to judge, too slow to forgive. She believed in bringing species together, finding common ground. I dishonored her memory with my hatred. Jake turned to face her fully. You honored her memory by grieving. The hatred, that's just pain that needed somewhere to go. Trust me, I know. How did you move past it? The anger? He thought for a moment. I realized I had a choice. I could let Sarah's death define me, let it twist me into someone she wouldn't recognize. Or I could try to be the kind of person she'd have been proud of. Some days are harder than others, but I keep trying. And that's enough? It has to be. They sat in silence for a while, the steady hum of the hyperdrive filling the space between them. Finally, Kiranel stood. I should check on my guards. They're probably wondering why their princess smells like engine exhaust and pasta sauce. Ode de adventure, Jake said with a tired grin. Very fashionable in human space. She paused at the door. Captain, would you join me for breakfast tomorrow? I promise not to destroy any more equipment. I'll bring the coffee, he promised. After she left, Jake remained on the bridge, staring out at the streaking stars. In 24 hours, he'd gone from transporting a princess who hated him to... what? Friends might be too strong a word. But something had shifted between them. Something important. He thought about Sarah, about how she'd always made friends with everyone she met. She'd had a gift for seeing past the surface, finding the good in people. Maybe some of that had rubbed off on him after all. The Blue Wanderer sailed on through hyperspace, carrying two souls who'd found an unexpected connection in the vast darkness between the stars. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, delivering Kiranel safely home, collecting his payment, moving on to the next job. But tonight, for just a moment, Jake allowed himself to feel something he hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Hope that the galaxy wasn't as cold and unforgiving as he'd believed. Hope that understanding could bloom even in the rockiest soil. Hope that maybe, just maybe, the best parts of humanity, their resilience, their creativity, their stubborn refusal to give up, were worth sharing with the universe after all. The stars streaked by, and Jake Morrison smiled. The morning of their final day together started differently. Instead of finding Kiranel attempting to destroy his galley, Jake found her already there, successfully operating the coffee maker and humming what sounded like a Zalathi funeral dirge. That's cheerful, he commented, accepting the cup she offered. It's a song my sister used to sing, she explained, though she always got the notes wrong. Used to drive our music tutors to despair. Rebels run in the family, huh? More than my father would like. She'd gotten better at the coffee, he noticed. It was almost drinkable. I've been thinking about what you said. About choices. Jake settled into what had become his usual spot, waiting. He'd learned that Kiranel sometimes needed time to organize her thoughts before speaking. When we arrive at Luminara, I'll need to make a choice, she continued. My father expects me to announce my intention to accept the throne. The council has been preparing for months. But I'm not the same person who left 3 days ago. She stared into her coffee, as if it held answers. This journey has shown me how much I still need to learn about other species, about myself. How can I rule fairly when I've spent years nursing prejudice? Jake chose his words carefully. Seems to me recognizing your own biases is the first step to overcoming them. That already puts you ahead of most leaders I've met. Perhaps. Or perhaps it simply shows I'm not ready for such responsibility. Before Jake could respond, proximity alarms chimed. They'd arrived at the edge of Zalathi space. Through the viewport, the luminescent world of Luminara grew larger, its 3 moons creating a complex dance of light and shadow across its surface. Beautiful, Jake murmured. Home, Kiranel said, but she didn't sound entirely happy about it. The communication system lit up immediately, multiple official channels, all demanding to speak with the princess. Jake raised an eyebrow at the flood of messages. Popular lady. The burden of royalty? She straightened, and he could see her putting on her princess persona like armor. I should speak with them. But before she could open a channel, another alarm sounded. This one made Jake's blood run cold. Collision warning. He spun to the controls, fingers flying over the displays. What now? Kiranel demanded. Ship dropping out of hyperspace right on top of us, Jake reported. Too close, too fast. They're going to... The impact sent them both flying. Jake's head cracked against the console, stars exploding across his vision. Through the ringing in his ears, he heard Kiranel calling his name. I'm okay, he managed, pulling himself upright. The displays were flashing red. Hull breach in Cargo Bay 1, shields failing, engines offline. What hit us? His answer came in the form of boarders streaming onto his bridge. Not pirates this time. Zalathi military in full combat armor. They moved with practiced efficiency, securing the bridge in seconds. Princess Kiranel, their leader said, bowing slightly. By order of the Royal Council, you are under protective custody. Please come with us. What is the meaning of this? Kiranel demanded, every inch the royal despite the chaos. How dare you attack a diplomatic vessel? I apologize for the rough treatment, Highness, but we have credible intelligence of an assassination attempt. We needed to extract you immediately. Assassination? Jake struggled to focus through his pounding headache. Who would... The soldier's rifle butt caught him in the stomach, dropping him to his knees. The human is to be detained for questioning. Stop! Kiranel moved between them. Captain Morrison is under my protection. He saved my life, twice. Our orders are clear, Highness. All non-Zalathi are suspects until proven otherwise. More soldiers appeared, dragging Varric and the other guards. They looked roughed up, but alive. The head of security caught sight of Jake and snarled. Should have known the human was involved. Probably signaled his pirate friends. Enough! Kiranel snapped. Captain Morrison destroyed those pirates. I won't have... Another impact rocked the ship. This time, Jake recognized the weapon signature. Zalathi heavy cruiser, targeting their engines to prevent escape. The Blue Wanderer groaned under the assault, and Jake felt something break inside him. His ship. They were destroying his ship. Your Highness, the soldier said urgently, we need to leave, now. They dragged Jake to his feet, none too gently. Kiranel protested, but the soldiers were already moving, forming a protective circle around her as they headed for the airlock. Jake caught her eyes as they separated them, saw her mouth, I'm sorry, before she was swept away. The brig on a Zalathi cruiser was exactly as comfortable as Jake expected, which is to say, not at all. The cell was a sterile cube of white walls and harsh light, with a force field that hummed ominously. They'd taken his jacket, his tools, even his boots. The medical officer had been thorough but not gentle, healing his head wound with obvious reluctance. Hours passed, or maybe days. It was hard to tell in the unchanging light. Jake dozed fitfully, waking whenever footsteps approached. But they always passed by. No food, no water, no information, just silence and that damned humming. He was contemplating the fascinating patterns in the ceiling tiles when the force field finally dropped. A Zalathi official entered, tall and severe in formal robes. Jake recognized the type, bureaucrat, probably intelligence. "Captain Morrison, I am Investigator Kess. You will answer my questions." "Love to," Jake croaked. "But how about some water first? The hospitality here is somewhat lacking." Kess gestured, and a guard brought water. Jake drank gratefully, buying time to think. "Now, what's this about an assassination?" 3 hours before your arrival, we received intelligence that someone would attempt to kill Princess Kiranel during the succession ceremony. The attack would be blamed on human extremists, derailing the peace negotiations your governments have been conducting." Jake frowned. "And you think I'm involved? You were the only human with access to her. Your ship deviated from filed flight plans. You were attacked by pirates, or so you claim. Perhaps they were accomplices who outlived their usefulness. That's the dumbest theory I've ever heard." Jake set down the water glass harder than necessary. "I nearly died protecting her. Twice. Why would I do that if I wanted her dead? To gain her trust. To get close enough for a killing blow at the ceremony." Kess leaned forward. "We know humans are capable of long-term deception. Your species' gift for improvisation makes you dangerous." Jake laughed, which probably wasn't the smartest response. "Right. I'm such a mastermind that I destroyed my spare hyperdrive, fought off pirates, and shared pasta with the princess, all as part of some elaborate murder plot. Do you people even listen to yourselves?" "Your sarcasm is noted," Kess said coldly. "Where were you during the border conflict 5 years ago?" The change of subject caught Jake off guard. "Running cargo in the Outer Rim, far from any fighting. Why?" "Princess Kiranel's sister was killed by human mercenaries during that conflict. Perhaps you were one of them. Perhaps this is revenge for some slight or payment for old debt." "I never fought in any war," Jake said firmly. "Check my records. I've been an independent freighter captain for 15 years. No military service, no mercenary work, just cargo and passengers. Records can be forged." "Then why ask me?" Jake's temper was fraying. "You've already decided I'm guilty. Why this charade?" Kess stood abruptly. "The princess insists on your innocence. She's refused to participate in the ceremony until you're released. This complicates matters." "She has good taste," Jake muttered. "Indeed. Which is why you're going to confess." Jake's head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Confess to the assassination plot. We'll be lenient, exile instead of execution. The princess performs her duties, the real assassins are deterred, everyone wins. Everyone except me, rotting in some prison colony for a crime I didn't commit. A small sacrifice for galactic stability." Kess moved to the door. "Think about it, Captain. Your life for hers. Isn't that what heroes do?" The force field hummed back to life, trapping Jake with his thoughts. He slumped against the wall, mind racing. They wanted him to be the fall guy, to take the blame so they could sweep the real threat under the rug. Typical bureaucratic thinking. But Kiranel was refusing to play along. That had to be driving them crazy. A princess who wouldn't follow the script, who'd formed an attachment to a human of all things. He could imagine the council's horror. More time passed. Jake was starting to seriously consider confessing just to get a change of scenery when the force field dropped again. But instead of Kess, Kiranel swept in, resplendent in formal robes but with fire in her eyes. "Out," she commanded the guards. They hesitated. "I said out." The royal voice was not to be denied. The guards retreated, though Jake could see them hovering just outside. "You look terrible," she said, examining him critically. "Prison chic. Very fashionable in human space." He managed a tired grin. Shouldn't you be preparing for your ceremony? There will be no ceremony until this madness ends. She began pacing, reminding Jake of a caged predator. They want me to believe you're an assassin, that our entire journey was manipulation. Your investigator made a compelling case. Apparently, I'm a mastermind playing the long game. She snorted. You can barely operate a coffee maker without supervision. The idea that you're some sort of covert operative is absurd. Hey, I've gotten better with the coffee maker, Jake protested. Marginally. She stopped pacing, fixing him with those silver-ringed eyes. Tell me the truth, Jake Morrison. Are you here to kill me? He met her gaze steadily. No. Have you ever worked as a mercenary? No. Did you have anything to do with my sister's death? No, Kiranel. I swear on my daughter's memory I had nothing to do with any of this. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. I know. I've known from the beginning. But the council refuses to listen. They see what they want to see. A convenient scapegoat to avoid addressing the real threat. Which is, someone within our own government wants me dead. Someone who benefits from continued conflict with humanity. She resumed pacing. My father's illness has created a power vacuum. There are those who believe I'm too young, too inexperienced, too sympathetic to other species. Because of your sister? Because of her vision. She believed in unity, in finding common ground between species. Some consider that weakness. She laughed bitterly. And now, after meeting you, I'm beginning to understand what she saw, which makes me even more of a threat to them. Jake pushed himself to his feet, swaying slightly. So what's the plan? They want me to confess, take the fall. Maybe I should... Absolutely not. Her voice could have cut steel. I won't have an innocent man punished for political convenience. Besides, it wouldn't solve anything. The real assassins would simply wait for another opportunity. Then what? A slow smile spread across her face. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who'd learned from the best, and the best happened to be a human who'd turned a spare part into a weapon. We're going to do something gloriously stupid, she announced. Something unpredictable. Something human. Despite everything, Jake found himself smiling back. I'm listening. The ceremony is in 3 hours. Everyone who matters will be there, including, I suspect, whoever wants me dead. They'll expect me to follow protocol, to stand where I'm told, say what I'm scripted to say. But you won't. No. I'm going to tell the truth. All of it. About my journey. About you. About my sister's real vision for our people. And I'm going to formally request you stand with me as my honored guest and protector. Jake blinked. That's going to cause a diplomatic incident. Several, probably. Her smile widened. The council will be furious, but they can't stop me. Not publicly. And whoever wants me dead will have to act openly, with a human standing right beside me. Your presence will disrupt their plans. Or make their job easier. 2 targets for the price of 1. Perhaps. But I suspect anyone willing to assassinate me at my own succession ceremony isn't particularly concerned about collateral damage. She moved closer. I'm asking you to risk your life again. You have every right to refuse. Jake thought about it for all of 2 seconds. When do we start? She blinked, clearly expecting more argument. Just like that? Just like that. He shrugged. I told you I'd see you home safe. Job's not done yet. The job ended when we reached Zalathi space. Maybe the official job, but somewhere between the pirates and the pasta, this became personal. He met her eyes. I lost my daughter because humans and Zalathi couldn't find a way to coexist peacefully. Maybe helping you become the leader your sister envisioned is my way of honoring Sarah's memory. Kiranel was quiet for a moment. Then she reached out and grasped his hand, a gesture of profound trust among her people. Then we face this together. As friends. As friends, Jake agreed. She called for the guards, imperious once again. Release this man immediately. Provide him with appropriate clothing for a royal ceremony. He stands under my personal protection. The guards exchanged uncertain looks. Highness, the council serves the throne. Until my father formally abdicates, I speak with his authority. Release him now. They had no choice but to obey. As Jake was led away to be cleaned up and dressed, he caught Kira Nell's eye one last time. She winked, actually winked, before sweeping out in a rustle of royal robes. 2 hours later, Jake stood before a mirror, barely recognizing himself. The Zalathi formal wear was surprisingly comfortable, all flowing lines and subtle colors that shifted with the light. They'd even returned his boots, polished to a shine he'd never achieved on his own. Varric appeared in the doorway, looking like he'd swallowed something sour. The princess requires your presence. Lead the way, big guy. They walked in silence through corridors that grew progressively grander. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on the walls, and Jake could hear the murmur of crowds in the distance. You know I didn't do anything wrong, Jake said conversationally. I know, Varric admitted grudgingly. Your actions during the pirate attacks were admirable. No assassin would have risked so much. So why the hostility? Because your presence complicates everything. The princess was beginning to heal, to move past her anger. Then you appear, and suddenly she's questioning centuries of tradition, challenging the council, making enemies she doesn't need. Maybe she's not making enemies. Maybe she's revealing ones that were already there. Varric had no answer to that. They reached a set of massive doors, beyond which Jake could hear hundreds of voices. The ceremony chamber. Kira Nell waited there, transformed once again. Her formal robes were work of art, seeming to capture starlight in their folds. But it was her expression that caught Jake's attention, determined, fierce, ready for battle. You clean up well, she said. You should see me in a tux. I'm devastating. He offered his arm. Ready to scandalize some aristocrats? More than ready. She took his arm, and Jake noticed her hand was trembling slightly. Whatever happens, thank you. For everything. Thank me after we survive this. The doors opened, revealing a chamber that took Jake's breath away. The ceiling was transparent aluminum, offering a view of Luminara's 3 moons. Thousands of Zalathi filled tiered seating, their robes creating a sea of shifting colors. At the far end, a throne waited on a raised dais. The crowd's murmur died as they entered. Jake felt the weight of all those eyes, the shock and outrage rippling through the assembled nobility. A human, at a royal succession ceremony, on the princess's arm. He kept his head high and tried not to trip. They made it halfway before the first voice rang out. This is an outrage! An elderly Zalathi in elaborate robes stood, pointing accusingly. The human has no place here. Councillor Vex, Kira Nell said calmly, not breaking stride. How good of you to voice your objection so publicly. Please, continue. Tell everyone how you feel about human Zalathi cooperation. Vex spluttered, but others took up the cry. The chamber descended into chaos, voices raised in anger and shock. Through it all, Kira Nell walked steadily forward, Jake at her side. They'd nearly reached the throne when Jake saw it, a figure in servant's robes moving against the crowd, hand reaching inside their garment. Training he didn't know he had kicked in. He shoved Kira Nell aside just as the energy bolt seared through the air where she'd been standing. Screams erupted. Guards converged from all directions. But the assassin was already moving, producing a second weapon. Jake didn't think, just acted, tackling the would-be killer in a move that would have made his old football coach proud. They hit the ground hard, wrestling for the weapon. The assassin was stronger, trained, but Jake had desperation and a lifetime of bar fights on his side. He managed to knock the weapon away, just as guards reached them, pulling them apart. "Remove the hood," Kira Nell commanded, approaching despite the guards' protests. The hood fell away, revealing not the hardened killer Jake expected, but a young Zalathi woman, barely out of adolescence, her eyes blazed with fanatical fervor. "Traitor!" she spat at Kira Nell. "You would sell our people to the humans just like your sister. Better you die than see the throne corrupted." "Who sent you?" Kira Nell asked quietly. The girl laughed. "Does it matter? There are dozens like me, hundreds. Every step toward the humans is a step toward extinction. We remember what they did, even if you choose to forget." The guards dragged her away, still screaming. The chamber had fallen silent, the assembled nobility in shock. Jake picked himself up, checking for injuries. Just bruises, thankfully. "Well," he said into the silence. That was exciting. Despite everything, Kira Nell smiled. Then she turned to face the crowd, and her voice rang out clear and strong. "You see now the price of hatred. That child was raised on stories of human evil, taught that violence was the only answer, just as I was." She looked directly at Counselor Vex, who seemed to shrink under her gaze. "But I learned something these past days, something my sister tried to teach me before she died." She paused, making sure every eye was on her. "Hatred is easy. Understanding is hard. Working together is harder still. But it's the only path forward if we want to survive." She gestured to Jake. "This human saved my life 3 times. He showed more courage, resourcefulness, and honor than many who claim those virtues as birthright. If we cannot see past species to find the individual beneath, we doom ourselves to endless conflict." "Pretty words," someone called out. "But can we trust them?" "Trust must be earned," Kira Nell agreed. "Which is why my first act as queen will be to establish an exchange program. Humans and Zalathi, living and working together, learning from each other. Breaking down the walls of ignorance that make assassination attempts like today possible." "And what of the human?" Counselor Vex had found his voice again. "What reward does he claim for his service?" Jake stepped forward. "I don't want a reward. I just want to go back to my ship and keep flying." "Ah, yes, your ship." Kira Nell's smile turned mischievous. "The one our military damaged while rescuing me. I believe compensation is in order, full repairs plus improvements. Perhaps some of our latest shield technology, engine upgrades?" "I wouldn't say no to engine upgrades," Jake admitted. "Then it's settled." She faced the crowd one final time. "Change is coming, whether we embrace it or not. We can face it with fear and hatred, or with courage and open hearts. I know which path my sister would have chosen. I know which path I choose." She ascended the steps to the throne, each movement deliberate and regal. When she sat, it was with the authority of someone who'd earned their place through trials by fire, and vacuum, and pirates, and exploding hyperdrives. "Let any who would challenge my rule step forward now," she commanded. No one moved. Even Counselor Vex remained seated, apparently deciding discretion was the better part of valor. The rest of the ceremony proceeded smoothly, though Jake noticed significantly more guards than before. He stood with Varric and the others, watching Kira Nell formally accept the crown and responsibilities of leadership. She looked small on that massive throne, but her presence filled the chamber. Afterward, as the nobility filed out murmuring amongst themselves, she found him in the antechamber. "So," she said, crown slightly askew, "that went well. If by well you mean nobody else tried to kill you, then sure." Jake grinned. "Nice speech, by the way. Very queenly." "I had a good teacher." She removed the crown, rubbing her temples. "Someone who showed me that actions speak louder than words, and that sometimes the craziest plan is the only one that works." Speaking of plans, You were serious about fixing my ship? More than serious. The Blue Wanderer will be better than new. It's the least I can do. She paused. Though I hope you won't leave immediately. The exchange program will need advisors, people who understand both cultures. I could use someone with your perspective. Jake considered. I'm not really the advisor type, but maybe I could stick around for a bit, help get things started. Make sure nobody else tries to assassinate you. I'd like that. She smiled, and it was Kiranel's smile, not the Queen's. Besides, you still haven't tried proper Zalathi cuisine. I promise it's better than fermented tree bark. Now that's an offer I can't refuse. They walked together through the palace corridors, past windows that showed Luminara's glittering cities. Two people who'd started as enemies, united by loss, brought together by circumstance, and made friends through choice. Hey, Jake said suddenly. What was that wink about earlier? She laughed, the sound echoing off crystal walls. My sister used to do that when she was about to do something particularly rebellious. It felt appropriate. To rebellion, then, Jake offered. To understanding, she countered. And to friends who show us who we really are. Outside, 3 moons danced their eternal dance, casting silver light on a world that was changing. In the morning, there would be challenges. Political maneuvering, cultural clashes, the slow work of building bridges between species who'd spent years in conflict. But tonight, a human and a Zalathi walked as equals through halls that had never seen such a thing, proof that sometimes the impossible was just another word for opportunity. And somewhere in the palace shipyard, the Blue Wanderer waited for repairs, ready to carry her captain on new adventures. But not just yet. For now, Jake Morrison had found something worth staying for, a chance to be part of something bigger than himself, to help build the future Sarah would have wanted. The stars could wait. History was being made right here. As they reached the guest quarters, Kiranel paused. Thank you, Jake. For everything. I mean it. Thank you for not letting them throw me in prison forever. I'm fond of my freedom. Yes, well, I'm fond of my friends. She squeezed his hand briefly. Rest well. Tomorrow, the real work begins. Looking forward to it, Your Majesty. Just Kiranel, she corrected. Friends don't need titles. After she left, Jake stood at the window, looking out at the alien city that might become a temporary home. He thought about impossible odds and crazy plans, about pasta dinners and exploding hyperdrives, about a princess who'd learned to see beyond her hate, and a freight captain who'd remembered how to hope. Not bad for a simple transport job. In the distance, ships rose and fell from the spaceport, carrying dreams and cargo between the stars. Soon the Blue Wanderer would join them again, better than ever. But she'd carry more than just freight now. She'd carry the story of 2 people who'd looked past their differences to find common ground, proof that humans and Zalathi could do more than just coexist. They could thrive together. Jake Morrison smiled and went to bed, ready to face whatever tomorrow might bring. After all, he'd survived pirates, assassins, and royal ceremonies. How hard could building peace between species be?